The legacy he didn't choose. He was born into a house of Sunday legends, where football wasn't just a game, it was bloodline. The walls of the Manning home didn't display art or abstract philosophy. They bore framed photographs of bruises, faded jerseys, and frozen moments beneath stadium lights. Peyton Williams Manning, the second son of Archie Manning, opened his eyes not just to a world, but to a legacy that loomed like a shadow even on the brightest days. From his earliest memories, Peyton didn't throw a football for fun. He threw to live up to something. While other kids dreamt of being astronauts or firefighters, Peyton was already a quarterback in the making, coached not just by a father, but by a name that carried weight in every southern town with a high school stadium. Archie, once the savior of Ole Miss and the enduring icon of New Orleans, had never tasted true NFL glory. But his sons, his boys might. It wasn't rebellion that shaped Peyton's path. It was reverence. He admired his father, even idolized him. But admiration is a heavy thing when it comes with expectations. His older brother Cooper was once the family's brightest light, a gifted receiver with charm and agility. But a spinal condition stole that dream. And just like that, the torch was passed to Peyton. At Isidore Newman School in New Orleans, Peyton stood tall in the pocket, eyes scanning, mind calculating. He was meticulous, disciplined, and already rumored to be smarter than most coaches. But even then, the whispers followed him. He's good, but is he great because he's a Manning? Choosing the University of Tennessee was Peyton's first true decision. Ole Miss had history. Tennessee had challenge. He wanted to carve his own trail, one that didn't echo his father's footsteps. He threw for thousands of yards, shattered school records, became the face of a program desperate for national respect. Yet, the one thing he craved, the national championship, slipped through his fingers. Each season ended in disappointment, not for lack of effort, but because destiny can be cruel, even to the most prepared. Despite that, the NFL came calling. In 1998, he stood on the precipice, a young man with a laser arm, a photographic memory, and a last name that still commanded headlines. The Indianapolis Colts made him the #1 overall pick. But even as he held the jersey, cameras flashing, Peyton knew the truth. This was not the start of a dream. It was the beginning of a test. A different quarterback, Ryan Leaf, had dazzled scouts with flash and bravado. Some said the Colts made the wrong choice. Peyton didn't speak on it. He never had to. He'd been underestimated before, not by strangers, but by the silence of those who assumed he was simply following a script written by his father. But Peyton Manning wasn't born to play a part. He was born to rewrite the ending. And so, under the bright lights of Indianapolis, the boy raised by football began his quiet rebellion, not against his name, but to define it on his own terms. Built to break. The rookie year was unforgiving. Peyton Manning walked into the NFL not as a savior, but as a suspect. His name got him drafted. Now he had to prove he belonged. The Indianapolis Colts were a struggling franchise, lost in the fog of mediocrity. Fans hoped for a miracle. Instead, they got 3 wins, 13 losses, and 28 interceptions. Every mistake was amplified. Every interception was a headline. He'd drop back, scan the field, and throw with conviction, only to watch defenders dance away with the ball. The critics sharpened their knives. Overhyped. Overrated. Overwhelmed. The whispers returned, only louder this time, now broadcast on national television. But behind those numbers was a young man drowning in self-expectation. Peyton watched every snap in slow motion, dissecting his failures alone in the film room. His work ethic bordered on obsession. First in, last out, always studying, always grinding. But effort didn't buy forgiveness. The city was losing patience. His teammates questioned whether he could carry them. And somewhere deep inside, a voice he had buried began to echo. Maybe they were right. He didn't flinch in public. He gave perfect interviews, nodded politely, said all the right things. But behind closed doors, the pressure metastasized. Failure wasn't just painful. It was foreign. He had always been the most prepared man on the field. But preparation, he was learning, didn't guarantee results. Not in this league. Then came 1999. New coach. New energy. The pieces began to align. Peyton led the Colts to 13 wins. The interceptions dropped. The confidence returned, but with it, a new enemy: expectation. Success was now the minimum. Anything less than playoff dominance invited the same old criticism. He folds under pressure. In the postseason he did. Again and again. Losses mounted. Playoff exits turned into patterns. And no matter how many regular season records he shattered, the same narrative followed: stat machine, but not a winner. The burden of brilliance grew heavier. He wasn't just playing football. He was chasing ghosts. Every audible he called, every pass he released, carried the weight of public judgment. He was building something great, but greatness without validation felt hollow. What haunted Peyton most wasn't the criticism. It was the silence in the locker room after a loss. The quiet, the stares, the unspoken disappointment from teammates who had trusted him to deliver. Each season bled into the next. The numbers piled up. MVP votes came. Accolades. But the doubt never left. He began to understand that in the NFL, greatness wasn't earned in autumn. It was carved in winter. Cold, brutal, and merciless. January was the judge. And so far, January hated him. Still, he didn't run. He didn't lash out. Peyton Manning tightened his laces, watched more tape, and kept showing up. He wasn't looking for applause anymore. He was chasing something deeper. Redemption not from the world, but from the voice inside him that still wondered if he was enough. The ghosts of greatness. The year was 2009. Peyton Manning was at the peak of his powers. An MVP, a master of pre-snap warfare, a general under center. That season, he led the Colts to a 14-0 start, commanding games with surgical precision. Every throw seemed calculated, every audible like a game of chess where he always saw 5 moves ahead. For many, this was destiny approaching. Peyton would finally silence the critics. The Super Bowl was his to lose. And he did. In Super Bowl 44, facing the New Orleans Saints, a team from his hometown, Peyton was supposed to finish the arc he'd been building for a decade. Instead, with the game slipping away, he threw a crushing interception. A pick six. A dagger. As the Saints celebrated, Peyton stood still, helmet on, jaw tight, watching another championship slip from his grip. It wasn't just a loss, it was personal. In the locker room, silence reigned. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions because it already knows the answers. Peyton didn't say much. He rarely did after losses. He carried it like always, inward alone. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his unraveling. Over the next few seasons, his body began betraying him. The hits added up. The throws lost velocity. Then came the neck injury. Sudden, devastating, career-threatening. He underwent multiple surgeries. Couldn't grip a football. Couldn't turn his head. The man who once read defenses like books couldn't hold his own pen steady. Doctors were uncertain if he'd play again. Fans began to wonder if they'd seen the last of him. But nothing stung more than what came next. The Colts released him. The team he had rebuilt, carried, bled for, let him go. He watched on television as the Colts drafted Andrew Luck. A new face. A new era. And in that moment, Peyton Manning became what he'd never been before: disposable. Alone in his recovery, surrounded by shadows of who he used to be, he faced the question that haunted every aging athlete. Is it over? He kept training in private. No cameras. No guarantees. He threw passes to equipment managers. Ball after ball, until his arm ached and his fingers trembled. Not to prove the critics wrong, but to answer a deeper question. Did he still belong? Peyton Manning had once been the golden boy. Then the record breaker. Now he was something else entirely. A man stripped of armor, uncertain if he could still play the game that had once defined him. But some men are built not just to perform, but to endure. And though the world had turned the page, Peyton hadn't. He wasn't done writing. The Sheriff's last ride. When Peyton Manning signed with the Denver Broncos in 2012, the world watched with skeptical eyes. Could the man who had been cast aside, whose body had nearly broken beyond repair, rise again? Denver wasn't Indianapolis. This wasn't home. But Peyton was no stranger to pressure. And this challenge awakened something fierce within him. He arrived like a quiet storm, determined to reclaim his place. The Broncos gave him the nickname the Sheriff, a nod to his commanding presence, his ability to control the offense, and the respect he inspired. He was older now, his arm not as explosive, but his mind sharper than ever. He studied defenses relentlessly, dissecting every angle, every tendency. Football was no longer just physical, it was cerebral, a chess match he was born to win. In 2013, Peyton broke the single-season touchdown record, throwing 55 touchdown passes.